This is the Parents in Sport podcast. Amazing guests, honest conversations, topics that matter.
Welcome to season 6 of the Parents in Sport podcast. I'm your host, Gordon MacLelland. I'm delighted to be joined today by performance psychologist Katie Mobed. Katie, thank you for joining us on the show.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Season 6. That's impressive.
Yeah, we've still got there. Yeah, the 50th episode has just gone out, and this is obviously going to be aired early 2025. So start of season 6. We're going to talk about everything you've seen in your life in the world of sport as a performer, a sports psychologist. Maybe have a little bit of fun later on looking at your novice sports parenting. I know your two are particularly young, but I think we can touch on that as well. But before we get into it, can you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. I suppose my initial kind of interest and passion for sport came as a youngster myself. I was an artistic gymnast. I just adored the sport when I was a lot younger. It became quite serious. I was training about 30 hours a week at the age of 12, which is interesting to look back on now as a sports psychologist. I had some fantastic experiences in the sport and competed for my country and traveled the world, but I also really struggled with it. I really struggled with kind of the fear aspect of gymnastics and some of the acrobatic moves that my coach wanted me to do. I had a difficult relationship with my coach, didn't feel able to really kind of communicate with him very well. And when I finished, I retired at the ripe old age of 17. And I just had a really strong sense that sport could be different, that sport could be a happier, healthier experience for youngsters. And I was so curious about, like, I had, a strength and conditioning coach. I had a nutritionist back then, even at the age of 12, and obviously technical coaches, but there was nobody back then. This was a long time ago now, but there was nobody really looking after the psychological side and helping build confidence and helping improve communication between the athlete and the coach. And so I was like, gosh, I wonder if that's a job. I wonder if I could do that. And I wonder if the mind can be developed, or if perhaps, as I thought back then, you're kind of just born tough or you're not. You've either got it or you haven't. I was probably a bit fixed in my mindset. So that's kind of where it all began. I went on to study sports psychology at university, found it fascinating what I learned about the mind and how it can be developed and how it can be tricky as well if you don't kind of understand how it works. And then almost 20 years on now, I've been leading sports psychology across different Olympic sports. I've coached athletes and worked with coaches at the last 4 Olympic Games, starting back in London and most recently in Paris, working across a range of sports, particular passion for team sports. And then alongside that, I've just had a really unique opportunities, like an opportunity to co-author a couple of books with Marcus Rashford aimed at young people and helping them kind of find their love for sport and grow their confidence through sport. And as you were saying before we went on the podcast, most of all, just trying to figure out how to be a great mum to these 2 little munchkins that my husband and I have in our family. So that's a potted history.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, thanks for sharing. I mean, even in your introduction there, I mean, there's so many questions I want to ask. I mean, I think because of our work in gymnastics around the world, I think it's probably worth digging a little bit deeper and starting back there. Obviously, when you were growing up, you don't really know what environments are. You turn up and you just sort of do what's in front of you, don't you? And you sort of come out of the other side. Looking back, and I suppose this is still a battle now in the sport of gymnastics just because of the sheer volume of time, 30 hours a week, age of 12. What's your gut feeling? Is there a better balance? Is it needed? That's obviously just a number. It's not necessarily an optimum number. Can they have breaks in the course of a year, which we push for? All of those things. What's your gut looking back on it all?
My gut feel is absolutely yes. And often people ask me, would you want your children to be involved in gymnastics? And I think my initial reaction is probably no. And I actually took my daughter to she's 5, I took her to a local club last year. And it's hard to know whether I was just really looking out for it, but I was really disappointed to see how quick the focus on execution, on doing it right, was brought in even at that age. If they were doing like a little kind of like skill trick thing, and if they didn't land it properly, they had to do it again. Whereas to me, like at the age of 4 or 5, just go and have fun, just run wild, just go and express yourself. And it wasn't like that, and I didn't take her back. That said, I learned a lot through gymnastics. Interestingly, I've never broken a bone in my body, and I think part of that is because of the kinesthetic intelligence you grow through the sport at such a young age. But it's probably quite telling that it's only in the last 3 or 4 years that I've started to accept work in gymnastics. I think I needed to create some space to make sense of my own experiences because they weren't all that healthy or helpful. Yeah, I think so, and I think with play more at the heart of it, and more. I know that gymnastics is still an early specialization sport, but I think involving youngsters more in what do they want to train today, what do they want to have fun with, as opposed to here's the plan that the coach is telling you have to do. And the sport has shifted like this. I've been very fortunate to work with a couple of brilliant coaches, Brett and Michelle in particular, who coach Alice Kinsella and Georgia May Fenton, and just so inspired to see the way they, what's driving them as well, like how caring they are, how much they want to see the young people that they coach develop as people, not just as performers. And obviously those are two phenomenal gymnasts that are up on the higher stage. So I think the sport is shifting. It just has a long way to go.
Yeah, I think it is shifting. I think there's some brilliant people in there, and I know Georgia May and I know Michelle as well. And you look at some of those relationships. I go around a lot of gymnastics clubs now, and you can see people trying to shift, co-collaborate, change their environments, much healthier, much safer, a little bit more open. As you say, there was so much embedded practice. It was going to take time, but I do think it's going in the right direction, which I think is a positive.
Back then, I remember like we were weighed, like physically weighed, like 3 or 4 times across the session. There's just no science to that. But why would you even need to track weight within a 2-3 hour session? There was a lot of public, weights were put up on a sheet, and of course, that parents weren't allowed to watch. And that's curious, yeah, as to why that is, and that would be one of the things I would say. Like, I personally wouldn't send my daughter at this age to a club where I wasn't able to witness the environment and see what's happening.
And do you know what? That's tough in some places, Kate, because they just can't do it with the facility.
Yeah, space.
There's actually some who are like, oh, well, we've got no issue. And they're obviously trying to put up CCTV now so people can see in the coffee areas. So I think people are getting the idea of what healthy, good environments may be. I suppose the challenge in that sport is nobody's probably ever been able to find the optimum number. And as we don't quite know the magic formula to create an Olympian, we're very much still scratching at, well, what do you do? How much do you need to do? Where can you have the breaks in a year, for example? I think in the acro world, that I work in, it's a bit of a nightmare because if somebody takes a holiday, it affects the whole routine, doesn't it?
Right.
Because you work in a team rather than individuals. So you've got all of these things at play. You've obviously alluded to that. I think the play, the fun, the joyfulness, I think the better communication is obviously important. You must be seeing that across a lot of sports though as well, not just gymnastics, the importance of us actually being far more open and communicating a lot better.
Yeah, totally. And just yesterday, I was with an Olympic team, and it was like a 3 hour session, which is unusual for a group of young men to sit in a meeting room for 3 hours when they want to be out on the pitch playing their sport. But their energy for the topic, which was about like ownership and how can we shift an environment from being somewhere where athletes get told what to do to actually an environment where they're so excited to come and be a part of because they're going to develop their mastery of the sport. They're going to learn about themselves through it. And so where are the opportunities? I think so much of this, very, very few environments are deliberately toxic or deliberately unhealthy. Most of the time, it's people with really good intentions, but there's been a bit of a disconnect somewhere along the lines. And so you can imagine the coach that really wants to help that athlete thrive, and they think it's their job to tell them what to do. And that's the traditional, now quite old-fashioned method. Whereas nowadays, with youngsters coming through, they've got, we said to the group yesterday, you've got like four or five coaches, but you've got a squad of 30 here. Like, look at the brain power, look at the creativity. Like, don't sit on ideas, bring them forward. And of course, that means then as staff, we need to be open to it. We need to have different skills to be able to engage and listen deeply and all the rest of it. But it's, yeah, sport is on a massive journey at all ends, like across the pathway from what I can see in that space.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, no, I don't think people set out to make it bad or toxic. And I think we've got to be careful how far we go back. I mean, I say to people, you taught differently 25 years ago. Doesn't mean you were doing
Yeah,
anything bad. It just looked a little bit
yeah,
different. It certainly didn't look like it did,
totally.
towards the end. I think that's where external eyes help. I think people going in and looking at it and saying, well, you're going to have to explain that to me, certainly helps, because otherwise we become quite insular sometimes, don't we? And we just think, oh, well, we're all doing it well and we'll just support what we do within this group. And actually, I think people are becoming a lot more open to different views, different conversations. I think that's aiding every environment.
Completely. And there are aspects of it. Like the more I work within sport, the more I realize I don't know anything. I'm just constantly learning. I think when in my first Olympic cycle, with canoe slalom, I was so sure of some things that I now look back and think, what? I'm not so sure about that now.
Yeah.
But there's so many ways in which sport kind of can trip us up. So if you look at just the pure dedication that we think it takes to reach the top, then naturally people send their whole identity becomes about sport. And certainly when I was a gymnast, even at that young age, I saw like I was a gymnast. I wasn't a youngster who did gymnastics. I was a gymnast. And so even when I was at school and there were parties and there were social situations, I struggled to engage in those because I just felt different and I didn't feel like I was part of that. I obviously wasn't drinking. I wasn't really interested in boys. I just wanted to go to the gym. And so the environment naturally creates this sort of isolation and this difference that I think as parents, then it's so important how we, yes, support and nurture youngsters' love for the sport, but also remind them and show them that they're more than their sport. And again, you never would have a parent who would deliberately foreclose their child's identity, but it just sort of happens, I think, a bit by accident over time.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that there's some big messaging in there for parents, and certainly things we talk about, making sure your kids are multifaceted, that they have different experiences, different coaches, different environments, different social groups, where you can. Obviously, the challenge in certain performance environments, like you say, is that a large part of the week's already taken up getting from
Yeah.
A to B, and there's not much time left. So how you do that, I think that break one, um, when they do get a chance to have a break is important. I felt very bad in front of a group of under 15, under 16 parents in a Premier League football club last year who just in many ways resented the system when they're sharing that they'd missed out on family weddings, christenings,
Yeah.
not taken holidays. And actually, when you spoke to the club, they hadn't actually created that either. If they'd said they needed to go to a wedding or a christening when they were under 10 or under 11, it really wouldn't have been an
Yeah.
issue. But I think there's just that fear of commitment. Will you be black marked? Will
Yeah.
it be a
Yeah.
mark against you? That then creates it. And I think we've just got to open up these conversations to normalize them, I guess, that it's all right. And it's not going to be the difference between whether your child becomes an Olympian or a professional or not,
Well,
because you
actually, it could
decided to
help.
yeah, it
I
could
mean, and
help.
that's what we do even at that top level. Like within GB hockey currently, we've just finished, obviously an Olympic cycle coming into Paris, and all the players have an opportunity to apply for an extended break, so 3 or 4 months where they don't come into training, they go and pursue some career interests. And it's the first time I've seen it done. It was so like for me, very forward thinking, really healthy, and I genuinely think that many of those athletes that have taken that break will come back stronger. They'll come back hungrier. So if we can do it at an elite end, we can definitely do it younger in the pathway. But I also do recognize how tough it is for parents because I think if my mum had asked me when I was 12, 13, 14, do you want to come to this family wedding or do you want to go training? I would have said I want to go training. And so on the one hand, we're saying let's involve youngsters more, let's not just tell them what to do all the time. But on the other hand, I guess I'm also thinking as parents, often you do know best and you do know that actually it's really good for them to have a break and maybe that isn't a choice. And
Yeah.
maybe we have to be unpopular in that moment. So you can remind me of this when my daughter is like whatever sport she gets interested in. And
Yeah,
And
I will definitely be reminding you of
it
this.
was hard.
In a decade's time, I'm having
Yeah.
lovely fun with my teenage daughter at the moment, who doesn't listen to anything I've got to say about the
Gosh.
world. But if I pass it through another person, it's the best idea that's ever happened.
Yeah,
That's where
clever.
we are. I can accept that. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think there is that. It's hard and it's tough, and I think that's also where we've got to be a little bit careful that sometimes we're the adults, because
Mm.
that's the whole point in having some teachers and coaches
Yeah.
and parents, that actually, yes, you are part of this. Yes, you are going to be listened to, but actually, do you know what?
Mm.
I'm going to tell you at this point that actually this is going to be a better,
Yeah.
we've got to be
Totally.
careful. We don't get, haven't we, that we don't get too laissez-faire and carried away
Yeah.
with it. It's really
Completely.
balance, isn't it?
I literally think I need to write that down. But like you've sparked up the inner geek in me around, how the brain develops, and I'm sure you'll have had guests speak about this before. Just that youngsters, like, they don't have a mini adult brain; it is an incomplete brain, and the part that is undeveloped, like offline, in those young years, is the very part that will think logically about things and be able to think about consequences into the future, and frontal cortex and so on. And like, so you have to lend them your brain because they don't have access to that type of thinking more often than not. So yeah, from both a philosophical stance and from a neuroscience stance, yeah, we have to remember what we have, what our role is, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and we had Rachel Vickery on, the international gymnast from New Zealand, and we were talking a little bit around sort of choice and voice, which is obviously important. But she also said, well, we've got to add consequence as well.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
we're supporting young people, we have to point out that you can't have it all ways sometimes, that actually, hang on,
yeah,
you can't say you want to do this and then some of your choices don't look anything like
totally.
they need to. But actually, it's only going to be the adults who are going to be able to point that out to them, because they're not going
Yeah,
to work it out themselves.
no.
Yeah, I mean, fascinating guy. You could dig really deep into that. We touched on times changing, times evolving. You've obviously seen a bit of a shift in some of your work. Over all of the years, what have you seen? What do you think has moved the most? What do you think's important? I mean, I'm guessing the Katie, well, it would have been Katie Warriner back then. I'm
Yeah.
guessing the Katie Warriner that started to the Katie Mobed today will have hugely evolved her practice in what she
Yeah.
does. What you're holding sort of close to yourself now as the most important?
Love this question. Yeah. I think when I first started out, so let's look back to like 2011, and I was preparing a team for the London Olympics, and the main thing in my mind was I wanted to help them win. Like, because that's what I was employed to do. That's what I was judged on. It's what everyone told me they wanted to do. And literally it was all about winning. And then over the years, I guess it's quite a privileged environment to work in, where I mean, I absolutely love what I do for a living. I can't believe I can earn a living and support my family by helping other people achieve their dreams. That is remarkable to me. I think my parents definitely find it remarkable. Like, you had a lot of coffee today, Casey. I'm like, yeah, and some good conversations. But so sorry, I diverge you back then. So the focus was very much on winning. But then over the years, I guess I've just noticed that, in athletes are being braver to talk about this now. Adam Peaty is a real role model of this, for example, that a gold medal will not fix your problems. And, the Cool Runnings quote that is so rightly quoted so often, that, a gold medal is a wonderful thing, but if you're not enough without it, you'll never be enough with it. And I have seen that. Like, I've seen that not all medals are cherished. I've seen that not all champions are actually role models that you would want your children to look up to. And so over the years, what I've seen that makes my heart happy is a change and a deepening of how do we define winning, and a broadening of that concept. It's almost lazy to just say, the medalists, 1, 2, 3, they're the winners. Like, it's almost lazy to say that. And I would say now, you can't tell if someone's won truly or deeply, as Pippa Grain, she's a wonderful
Yeah.
psychologist who's done a lot of work in this space. She would say you can't tell if they've won deeply by where they're standing on a podium or where they finished up or what their time was. You can only tell if you actually take the time to ask some questions and, how much did they enjoy the journey? How did they grow as a person throughout it? What's the ripple effect of the performances that they've put out there, which reminds you of Kath Bishop as well. I'm sure you'll know Kath and her work around the long win, thinking about the wider society impact and the story of performance. So it's almost not enough now to just go after the win. It has to have more depth and more meaning, and above all, to be healthy. And is right, I keep going. So there's one other bit to
Yeah,
this.
absolutely. Keep going.
The thing that I've noticed, which I didn't realize initially, is that actually that what often drives elite athletes is not a particularly healthy fuel. It's often a misunderstanding from early life experiences, childhood and adolescence, around not being enough as they are. And so they're driven by this sense that I need to achieve amazing things in order to be loved or to be impressive or to be good enough. And yet, when you stop and ask an athlete, would your mum and dad love you anymore if you win this Olympic title? There's like this moment of like, no, no, no. Like, and yet you've been laboring under the kind of false illusion that this was really important and you have to achieve this result. So I think there's been a kind of looking under the bonnet of like actually what's driving athletes and to what degree are they driven by something a bit dysfunctional, and can we then, really ambitious, like for me, can we heal through sport? So can you actually realize you are enough as you are, go out and have fun with your sport, see what's possible, but don't think that this is what's going to make everything okay for you, because all the things that annoyed you the night before you won an Olympic medal will still annoy you in a few weeks' time. So happiness is like real success is an inside job. Just one final anecdote on that. When we were out in Paris, one of the Olympic teams, we asked the parents to write a letter to their youngster. Well, not in their 20s now, obviously up on the biggest stage, and we handed the letters out. We gave the parents a little bit of coaching, it partly to make sure that we didn't kind of fall down that societal like go out and smash it type, superficial message that nobody really needs to hear. And so we asked the parents things like, when your son or daughter steps out into the field of play, what do you want to know about? What do you want them to know about themselves, no matter what happens? If they lose a match or if they get defeated, what do you want them to know is true about them and how you feel about them, regardless of the scoreline? And those sorts of questions. And I think the parents quite enjoyed, that kind of being encouraged to think like that. When we handed those letters out to the group, oh my gosh, it was incredibly powerful, because even like, there's that stage where you reach the teens and not so interested in your parents anymore. I think it's more about your friends, but it kind of comes back round that actually it's above all, it is the love of parents or guardians, grandparents, siblings that is the best platform from which to go and perform that unconditional love. That was a long answer to your question.
No, I mean, it's a brilliant answer. I'm sort of scribbling away different bits and pieces, trying to tie it in with parent work.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that dysfunctional bit, I still think's an issue. And as I hear you say it's dysfunctional, I think I've spent a large part of my life in that exact same situation as a performer who didn't do it, probably didn't quite achieve what you wanted to achieve, probably spent 15, 20 years trying to prove a point, and probably only recently until starting doing this and actually enjoying giving back, and it was something that was mine and it wasn't created by anybody else, actually has found a far greater self-worth than in what you were trying to do, as a youngster. But you can see how that happens, can't you? Where even speaking to some teenagers at the moment, they'll say, well, I just don't want to let down my mum and dad. It is about success and winning, because that's what the society narrative tells us. And I was thinking last night, I've sort of just added this. I don't know where it came from. I don't even think I didn't hear it. I just sort of thought, well, actually, if we're supporting performance athletes, actually that makes us different as a performance parent, because we're actually almost going to have to forget everything we know about what society tells us about sport, and actually how do we support performance? And it just suddenly came out, because it was like, hang on, I'm telling you to behave and consider things that the rest of the world, you'd be looking at it on the TV and saying, oh no, well, that surely can't be the way to go
Yeah.
about it, but it's hard, really.
Yeah. And then it comes back to what we've touched on earlier around these misunderstandings. Because again, so I don't normally think about my gymnastics as much as I am through this conversation, but I remember growing up, like at family weddings or whatever it might be, I would be introduced as this is Katie the gymnast.
Gymnast.
Literally, it was like, and then I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm a gymnast. I'm gonna stand up, I'm gonna stand up properly and walk differently. And it was never like, this is Katie. She's my daughter. Like it was just,
And she's a lovely human being. No, no, she's
or a pain in the ass, or like
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
it might, whatever
yeah,
the truth is. But yeah,
yeah,
and I imagine that's because my parents were proud of my dedication to sport. But in that moment where you've got a very young, immature brain that is really, really prone to misunderstanding, you start to think, okay, that's why they love me. Or they love me because of that. And oh my gosh, they're like driving me to training, and they're sacrificing their Saturday afternoon to sit and wait for me at training. This is really important to them as well. Whereas actually, I bet it never really was that important to them, but they were trying to support. And in that process, became more and more misunderstandings opened up. And then you see that at the elite end, if a team comes back and they've won a medal, there are all these invitations to come on like award ceremonies and come into businesses and speak and all the rest of it. And if a team has given their absolute heart and soul and finished fourth, fifth, or sixth, their phone will be quiet. That it's not, it's not right.
yeah.
It's lazy. I think we can do better.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the bit around, supporting young people with this and supporting parents with this, and I think you touched on it when you got the parents to write the letter. I say to parents that at some point your child's sport ends. What are you actually hoping deep down when everything's finished that you're actually hoping they're going to have gained from the whole experience?
Yeah.
And you do get the vast majority who'll say, well, I want the life skills. I want them to develop their confidence. I want them to be good human beings. I want them to be resilient. I want them to be good team players, all of those things. And yet, actually, a lot of our behaviors as sports parents never reflect that because we don't talk about them. We
Yeah.
don't value them because the rest of the world's telling us, got to win, got to be selected at whatever stage that may be. So you're constantly in this battle of doing the right thing, but with all the external forces telling you
And it
that
takes you
this
in the
is,
other
yeah,
direction.
which is going in the other direction.
And I think they are. I was really like, my dad almost didn't speak to me because he's an absolute lifelong Leicester fan. But I was invited to speak up at Manchester United Academy last year, I think it was. They are so forward thinking in their approach, the coaches and the management team up there. And they wanted to put to the parents, it was a parent conference, they put to the parents, if you had a choice between your child growing up to be a well-rounded human, able to embrace life and contribute positively, or a winner, like a Premier League winner, what would you choose? And that was the debate. That was the debate. And of course, some people are like, why do I have to choose? Like, okay, maybe you don't have to, but if you had to, what
Mm,
would be most important? And then exactly as you said, then how are you aligning your behavior with that value? Like when they come to training, when you drive them back from training, the questions you do or don't ask,
yeah.
is it aligned? And for a lot of people, it wasn't. Again, not through bad intent, but just because everybody's busy, tired, trying to do their best, and we
Yeah.
just don't have the space to think and reflect, which is why your podcast is so important.
Yeah, and look, we're seeing that. I mean, I'm so lucky because I'm out in all these different places every night of the week almost at
Yeah,
the moment, and it's fabulous because you do get that space to talk, and you realise then what an impact. God, I've never even thought about it like this, never even considered what's actually going on here, and why should they? I say this to sports we work with. We're talking from a position of some kind of background in sport, coaching, education, young people, sports science, everything else. And actually, we're talking to people who may be builders or receptionists or hairdressers or people that haven't had any sports experience. And then we suddenly expect them to understand how to support or what it actually looks like with limited guidance. And actually, it's an impossible job anyway, even with some background, I think.
yeah, totally. And then you've got your own parenting involved in that, and the way we were parented, and then our parents coming from a war generation where this kind of depth of thought was just not possible. Like it was more of a survival type model as opposed to fulfillment, which is what people are now, pursuing. It's completely, the influences are changing constantly.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the sort of narrative, isn't it? How do we align trying to achieve results or perceived results, let's say, with creating the best environments and making, sense of that. I mean, I'll throw this one into you. This is slightly random. I'm going slightly off kilter here, but I think these are some of the challenges that we face. So if you look at how Gen Z are described, now I'm not a big fan of labels. I think it's lazy. I don't think everybody's like this at all. But if you take the descriptors of Gen Z, I said to a group of coaches in a high performance environment last week, none of them can be true high performers. Discuss. Now, you can imagine. Now, the point being that, of course, they can, and that's an absolute load of rubbish. But actually, if you look at some of the traits, such as addiction to technology, to entitlement, to takers, not givers, expectations not grounded in reality, all of those things. Well, actually, we've got a real challenge here. Because actually, it's going to be quite difficult to work with. If they appear with all of those traits into a performance environment trying to achieve, some of those are not going to be helpful. So how do we make sense of it to create the fact that that's where we are today? This is what we understand and know. How do we now move it on in the future?
Gosh, are you actually asking me that question?
Well, I just think the whole thing is fascinating, and people think it's so simple, and actually it's so complex. And I think it's the same as modern day parenting. You look at how we're described again. This isn't my quote. This is how we're described as raising the softest, most entitled generation that exit. That we always intervene and jump in at the first sign of adversity rather than work it out for themselves. Again, that's potentially at certain points going to cause.
When people make those statements, can they offer an explanation as to why? Why do they think?
Well, no, I don't know. They can't. That's why we're talking about it. That's exactly the point I make. So you get these snapshots of information, and that's where I suppose social media is a real damaging thing. I mean, let's throw another one out there. Comparison is the thief of joy. Well, not all the time.
Because I think it comes back to like, well, where are you starting from? And we were talking about results a minute ago. It's like, don't get me wrong, I love winning. Like, I love my teams.
Me too. I'm all in. I say that parents, I'm all in. I would love a professional footballer as a son. I would love it as a daughter. I love winning, massively competitive. I'm not going to hide it from you. But I also need to be realistic because I'm an adult and I understand it. But go on.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, but why do you want to win? That's where I've got to with it. It's like, yes, let's try and win, but let's be clear why. Because it's fun, because we want to see what's possible, not because you need it. So you want to win, you don't need to win. Tell me all the things that you are going to love about life, regardless of whether you win that tournament this weekend, whatever it might be. Like, let's have that perspective. So for me, it's like winning has to be put in the right context for it to then be a wonderful thing. Otherwise, it is more likely to be a harmful thing that will actually hold them back. And then the Gen Zs, I don't really know. Because I can draw on examples from my experience. So the first athletes I ever coached, like at an Olympic level, Tim Bailey and Etienne Stott, they were phenomenal individuals. They are phenomenal. They became the first Olympic champions in the sport of canoe slalom for Great Britain. And they were so down to earth. And I remember our psych sessions used to often be right at their house where they would be sitting on the sofa with their duvets on because they couldn't afford to put the heating on. And they were just hardy, and they just like they did what it took. Like they were out there paddling in the freezing weather, and I would be moaning about it, and they'd tell me to, pipe down and crack on. And it was amazing. So I could okay, that means that, there has been a generational shift. I don't see that so much anymore. In fact, I worked with an amazing team, the England Rugby Sevens men's team, into the Rio Olympics, whose one of their core value was love. And telling their coach and helping them communicate to their coach that they wanted love to be at the core of their values in rugby was a really interesting moment. And actually, again, an amazing coach, a guy called Simon Amor, who was so open to it because he was listening to what they wanted. He understood that it was like love for the game, it was love for the struggle, love for your teammate. But I don't think love is a word that as a value that would have come out 20 years ago as part of the values of a team. And so I can see that shift. But to me, I don't feel the need to like you said, label it or judge it. It's just, let's be curious about it. And okay, so if there is an addiction to tech, how do we make that a source for good? So can we set up some like Instagram channel that's about learning about their mind and learning about their connections? We use technology to kind of, rather than fighting it, because it's happening, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's the challenge, isn't it? Because actually, some bits of the use of technology are really good. Maybe late at night when it potentially affects sleep may not be. So that's routines at home. Maybe on the way to competition for young performers, not having your messaging function on may be a good idea.
Well, impact on decision making in game is harmed by time on social media. We like the guys hate
exactly,
to remind them of this instead.
Yeah, so we've got actually some good bits there, but actually we need to make some healthy choices on the other bits, which I think is a far better conversation. I think it's the comparison one is another one that's come up, because obviously when you speak to some young performers or even elite performers, they'll say, well, actually, I use comparison because I nick some of the things that other people are doing and I copy. It's inspiring, and that's a good bit. I mean, you love this answer as a mum now. I had a boy recently, we were asked talking about comparison. We were talking about when's it healthy, when's it good. And this 14-year-old boy said, Gordon, he said, I've got one. When I compare myself to 6 months ago, I could have given him a hug as a parent.
How did he get to be so wise?
What an answer. I mean, I was gobsmacked out of nowhere. I thought, yeah, you're absolutely bang on. Now, the mindless scrolling, the comparisons on fake lives, the use where it's not feeling good is a negative. But again, when you look at the world and you look at the information that it gets sort of flooded into environments, we get the blanket statement of comparison's the thief of joy. And I think both of us have probably found actually we've got to try and make some sense of this for the different relationships within an environment, because that's ultimately what it is. How are we seeing this and how do we work with it?
Totally. And maybe all we need to really do, as you're encouraging people to do through the podcast, is just think about it a bit more deeply. Like, let's think a bit more deeply about how we define winning, or why we want our youngsters to be involved in sport, and that takes energy and time, but ultimately it'll be worth it.
Yeah, out. Well, hopefully it'll be worth it.
It will.
It will, yeah, absolutely. Now, just moving it on slightly. So you're obviously a parent to two young kids, 5 and 1. Now this is going to be a whole different ball game. So you're now going to have to take everything you've learned as a performer.
Do I have to?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, everything that happened to you as a performer, along with everything that you've learned working within sport, you're then going to have to throw in the mix of all the emotions with it being your kid. And they're meant to have some autonomy rather than you deciding that they can't go to gymnastics anymore. and all of those things that you're gonna get fired. What are you thinking? What are you thinking you've got to prioritize? What do you think you're gonna set off and try and do? And how do you think you're gonna support it?
I'm in big trouble. That's what I think. And I need to share a tiny, honest anecdote, which I'm so embarrassed of. My daughter went to, in the half term, she went to a holiday camp for one of the days, and she came out beaming with this certificate that said Isla Mobed Star of the Day, for like good behavior or manners or whatever, something like that. And I found myself asking her, did everybody get a certificate or just you? And I was just like, all the words came out of my mouth. I was just like, what are you doing? Like, you've immediately made something really joyful a competition, as if it would mean less if everybody got a certificate. And I was just, you are a psychologist of 20 years training. Oh, wow.
But we don't open that can of worms, Katie, do we? Because does it mean less if everybody gets it? Maybe not to her, but
yes, exactly.
Maybe not to her, but it might.
She was like, she just ignored me. She just like, she's kind of quite a tough little cookie. She didn't even like engage with the question quite right too. But I think the things, sorry, come back to your question. How do I try and bring it all in? The one thing that I think the most about, and I was really lucky at the beginning of my career to receive some mentoring from Steve Peters, and he talked to us all about the fridge door syndrome. So when a youngster comes out, and I noticed it from the age of like 2, and she came out of nursery and she had drawn a picture, and she just thrust it into my arms, because even at that age, they're starting to tune into like, look, isn't it impressive that I've done something? I've achieved something. And the instant reaction is to want to take the picture and praise it and say it's the most wonderful thing in the world and isn't it brilliant? What Steve encouraged us to do was actually put that to one side and just say, right, I love you so much. It's so great to see you. Tell me about your day. And then we can look at this picture. So connect first, mum to daughter, mum to son, dad to son, whatever it might be. Connect first, and then talk about what it is they've achieved in quote marks, and do so because you've separated the achievement from the self-worth, self-esteem. Then you can be a bit more honest about it and say like, oh, wait, why is that only got one leg, or why has that one got four legs? Or, you know, just, you can just be a lot more like direct and honest because you're not actually criticizing them as a person. So I think that's the one thing that is real. I mean, I first met him way back at the beginning of my career, and that really stuck with me. He called it the fridge door syndrome because you most naturally you come home and you put it on the fridge. It's actually ask the child, do you want it on the fridge? I remember when I was a gymnast, my mum and dad had made a medal cabinet, all my medals, and I look back and I slightly die inside about that. Like, so just make sure, and again, they did it, like, love them to pieces. They would have done everything with the right intentions. But I would want to, let's ask, what do you want to do with these medals? And maybe if my son or daughter were to win a medal, like, they might just not care. They might want to just put it in a drawer, or they might want to put it on the wall, but let's at least ask the question. I think that's something I'm thinking of. And above all, like, it probably won't surprise anyone given the comments we've had, but just to keep joy and fun at the heart of it, and be asking questions about that, and not just like, you know, did you go well, but who did you help? Who did you encourage? Like, the connections and the relationships that you're going to grow through sport. Gosh, I'm going to just try and figure out as I go.
I suppose the final bit to add to that, then, that's the world according to Katie. Will your husband see it the same way?
Well, he has a very different upbringing to me. It should be a whole new podcast. And he and I constantly talk about this. And we met through sport. He was a sports physio with England Rugby, so he's had his own experiences in the world of high performance as well. I actually think he's even further that way. And almost like he will come out with things like, I only want our children to do team sport, because he thinks that through sport is the friendships, but that's what he experienced as a rugby player. Doesn't necessarily mean it's what they'll experience. So I think we're going to have to go head to head a bit on that.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's good to hear as well. And I think that's the other dynamic. That's the other dynamic we see playing out. I mean, I think one of the staff, we were doing a webinar last night with the Irish football national girls pathway and the parents. And I couldn't see everybody on the screen because there was a lot on there.
Yeah.
And actually, the person who was running the session said it was brilliant, Gordon. He said, because lots of them were in as couples, and you could see loads of them turning to each other and saying, "You do that, you do that, you do that." And she
You're
said,
definitely hoping that they're going to back up your point, not your husband's point.
Yeah, she said it was brilliant. She said it was like them sort of playing marriage counselling with each other in the chat. And actually, we said afterwards, actually, that's all you want. These conversations are all not about telling people what to do. It's just raising self-awareness, because every environment, every context, every upbringing, everything we bring to it is going to look a little bit different. So there isn't a one size fits all.
And there will almost always be good intentions. Like, the one thing my husband and I, Remy, definitely clash on is that if Isla falls over, he is very much of the school of thought of do not react. She's going to be tough. The world's tough. I need her to be tough, you know, and because he loves her so much, he wants her to be a tough little cookie, which, you know, she is. Whereas my natural reaction would be more to go and like check in. And the reality is, actually, neither one of us is right or wrong. It's probably both of us coming in from the edge, and actually that's probably the best approach for our kids. And so if we can kind of bring the best of his approach, the best of my approach, then we'll be in a good place. Of course, we don't always manage that, but we're working on it.
No. And there's no such thing as perfection, which I think is probably a good way to round off the podcast. Katie, it's been an absolute joy having you on. I feel like we could have spoken for hours and hours. We were sticking to some form of script, which I don't think we've really stuck to at all. Maybe there'll be another conversation for another day, but just want to thank you for giving up your time, sharing everything that you've learned across your lifetime in sport. And I do look forward to speaking to you again in due course.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. Check us out at parentsinsport.co.uk.